welcome you today to the Metropolitan Community Church of Washington, D.C. Spiritual Engagement Hour. If this is your first time to be with us, my name is Dwayne Johnson. I'm the senior pastor. I'd love to hear from you. My email is revdwayne@mccdc.com. I bring you greetings today from our associate pastor, Reverend Kathy Alexander. She is here today with the music engagement time, the rehearsal time, preparing for our 10:30 a.m. worship service. And she does send her greetings today and also would love to hear from you. Her email is revkathy with a C at mccdc.com. This is a time for us to dialogue together, to share our ideas, to be in conversation, to offer help and support. Sometimes we have different viewpoints and we learn from those. And we're grateful that this is a place where we can disagree and still look at each other and view each other as siblings on the journey together. On this day, I invite us to just take a moment to be present to our bodies. There's a lot going on in many of our bodies this week. We'll light the candle today to remind us of the loving presence of our Creator. This candle also reminds us to pray for our community. As our opening prayer today, I offer these words of Jesus. Blessed are people who are hopeless, because the realm of heaven is theirs. Blessed are people who grieve, because they will be made glad. Blessed are people who are humble, because they will inherit the earth. Blessed are people who are hungry and thirsty for the ways of God, because they will be fed until they are full. Blessed are people who show mercy, they will receive mercy. Blessed are people who have clear hearts, because they will see God. Blessed are people who make peace, because they will be called God's children. Blessed are people whose lives are harassed because they are righteous, because the realm of heaven is theirs. Blessed are you when people insult you and harass you and speak all kinds of bad and false things about you, all because of me. Be full of joy and be glad, because you have a great reward in heaven. In the same way, people harassed the prophets who came before you. And that's from Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, his wisdom sayings that are often referred to as the Beatitudes. We offer those as a prayer today. And today our theme is spiritual essentialism and justice. There's two questions that we offer today, and more I'm sure will arise in our conversation. The first question is, what is essential in our post-election responses and actions? And then the second question, moving forward, what is non-negotiable? Or perhaps you might reframe it, what might call for very careful negotiation when it comes to actions and caring for ourselves and others. So I open this time for us to consider these questions or other questions that may be on your heart. Today really is about continuing to love each other and support each other and be that community for such a time as this. If Todd Clark is with us today, thank you, Todd. You, along with many others in our community, have been doing some writing. And so we do invite you to share the writing that you have today also as part of the foundation for our conversation today. Come on in, Todd.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, good morning, everybody. I went for a walk on, it was Friday, up into Rock Creek Park with my best friend, and it was supposed to be an hour walk. It was a 2-hour walk. It was beautiful. Weather was warm. It was 84 degrees, and both of us needed to walk by a creek and be in the sun that day. It was such a healthy time. So, but I wrote this the day after the election results were um, announced. It was on the morning of November 6th. So it's called November 6th, 2024. There is now more important, needful work to do. Better angels work, resist cruelty work, find and strengthen allies work, faith work, and prayer work. So for today and in the coming days, know that you are not alone. Trust that love is a mightier strength, that we are the better angels, that hope is worth holding on to, that we must be that still small voice of loving compassion and justice within, that voice of healing which resides deeply in our own hearts. And whenever possible, a voice which must be heard and felt in our homes and by our families of origin and families of choice, in our neighborhood and across the communities that we journey through, an essential voice for a chaotic world that desperately needs us to boldly speak up and to bravely show up. Above all else, it is a time for us to teach love, to create a more beloved community. Rest is essential. The headwinds will be strong, the cruelty will be astounding, and our faith will yet endure. No act of kindness is too small. Be kind to yourself and to others. Love is, as always, the guidepost and the rudder. The God of your understanding is the way and the journey. So be clear, be focused, renew your faith, and remember that you matter. You are loved. Love endures. God is still forever in these times as well, with certainty and strength. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd. So we welcome those that gathered here in the on-site space as well as those online to unmute and check in, or you certainly have the chat box as well, which Canute is monitoring. And responses that you have either to what we've offered so far, the questions, or certainly any thoughts or reflections prompted by Todd's writing. I, for one, appreciated the directness of what you wrote, as well as the simplicity of it, which speaks, I think, to what's essential. When I first read what you wrote, this idea of what's essential to me emerged from it.
I think everyone in the room and people listening in real time and in later time will probably be able to say, look, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine or a sister or a brother, and we shared with each other um, how hopeless we feel at the same time arriving, and I'm hoping the conversations arrive at this at a place of resoluteness. But then this question comes up, this quandary, the essential quandary of how do you how and maybe this is another way for me to be direct again. How do we love and show love to places and people that mean harm for us? You know, that hate us, um, and are acting on the hate in it right in the town square, right in front of us. Um, so the conversation stops for a moment, and y- I feel coming up within me this need to assert, just like the invitation for this prayerful coming together today, Reverend Dwayne. Don't I can't quote it directly, but don't take on the armor and violence of those who are arming and becoming violent towards you. I know
Mhm.
that's not the best rephrasing of it, but don't become the enemy that you're trying to resist. or don't become as the enemy you're trying to resist. And we know what it was like to gather under the banner, the general banner of Black Lives Matter, and to the lesser degree, people who showed up with an anti-fascist mindset. Those people are called Antifa, anti-fascist. So we know what it was like on Black Lives Matter Plaza, and I've anyway. We can talk a lot about all kinds of things, but I feel like those days are around the corner. Um, so how do we position ourselves to be a loving force, a loving presence, a loving presence of resistance? And so many have written about it. Um, the preaching nonviolence. Uh, yes, yes, Jackie. So we need to learn from our ancestors, right?
Yes, so thank you, Todd. We do have a comment in the chat box. If Canute could read that. And again, we welcome other thoughts, questions, responses, or perhaps some of you have a reading or a quote or a scripture or something on your heart that you'd like to share. It's all welcome in this supportive space where we seek to offer help.
Yes, thank you. And I will read what Jackie Lewis put in the chat. Did not our fathers and mothers prepare us for this time? Who prepared you? Who do you need now? Who do you call on? You have all you need right now.
Thank you, Jackie Lois, from coming in from Detroit. Thank you.
So maybe that is our call, is to lift up those voices that have always spoken up over time. These kinds of times, lift those voices up.
Yes.
And we can use and we can use them as an example of how we go forward. Because of the times, the situations that our ancestors went through. And that served as a guide on how to move forward and how to respond to people in situations where we are faced with, I guess, for lack of words, our enemies, or in situations where we are that we are perceived as threats to whatever.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, perhaps it's the contemplation is what does a group like this, um, these are other questions, Reverend Dwayne. What does a group like this need to do to prepare and equip itself? And then secondly, how do you offer yourself to those that need equipping, for lack of a better way to put it, or those that need your guidance or need your comfort and your spiritual instruction? Um, so I'm recognizing this calling to prepare oneself, and in many ways, and through prayer and through voices and thinking about the ancestors and the questions Jackie's raising. Those are prescient. Those are essential questions. So finding your angel, finding and being your angel network, finding and being your support for that. Um, Yeah, the difficulty is there's so many people who are not hearing the alarm clock going off. You know, the alarm is going off right now. Um, so yeah, this is the beginning of a lot of important dialogues and preparation and rooting into your faith, digging deeper into your faith.
Yes. I think one thing that's essential and important in this conversation is being compassionate and present to people in a variety of locations in terms of what's happening in their bodies and their spirits and their minds. There are some people who got up on Tuesday morning and were ready to go to the streets, and they were ready to protest, ready to move immediately into action. And action is a necessity. And there are other people who at this point, even today, and we cannot timeline it, are in places where they need to attend essentially and first to their bodies, their hearts and their minds and well-being in order to move to new places when that time is there. So much of this cannot be timelined. And what's important, I think, as community is to not expect others to be in the same place that we're in and to give us the space while still knowing that there is a sense of urgency at the same time. And so it's balancing compassion and self-care and other care with what's also urgency and wrestling with the really difficult questions like how does one love one's enemy? And how about for folks who are more pacifist by nature who even struggle with the word enemy? Taking all of that into balance and into pondering, as well as the invitation to mobilize as community, knowing again that we're at these different spiritual locations and physical locations. Our bodies are responding differently. Each body is unique, awesomely and wonderfully made.
The other thing it brings up for me is acknowledging how there'll be, like you just said, there'll be many dichotomies. There's the fierce urgency of now, and then there's the respect for needing to find respect and patience for where people are at, right? Um, and it feels like this is both a super complicated time. Many things are going to be happening very quickly, but it's also a time where a simple question of asking yourself and hopefully it's not a simple question, but it's an essential question of what is right and what is wrong in this scenario. What feels and this is where one's faith and the God of your understanding and the essentialness of love and forgiveness comes in, because what is right and what is wrong, and I know it sounds really simple, but um there if you can see things, if you can keep remembering to see things through that filter, and that filter is framed with God's love, what is right, what is wrong here? um maybe that's a helpful centering place to get to, because there'll be conversations that get very confusing. I talked to a friend of mine who's it's more and more apparent that he's um, a full Trump MAGA believer, and just a simple conversation of asking, well, what do you think was meant by Puerto Rico was a floating pile of garbage, and his answer was, well, what he was doing was making a joke about their landfill management problem. They have a trash collection problem on Puerto Rico. And like, it was just so infuriating to have that one simple, tiny little I was trying to find some common ground, and that's his understanding, and yeah. Anyway, it's just but thinking about what is right, what is wrong, and we have a person who's done so much wrong, who's now in charge. That's the hard thing. There was someone I heard on Facebook who said, "Look, remember what we taught in Sunday school? Be good to people. Be good to people, and that's the right thing to do." And he said, "Look, I feel like that all those for him, he was saying, I feel like all those lessons just got thrown out the door. How do I tell my kids it's you'll be rewarded by doing good when someone has seemingly been rewarded who has been doing bad?" So these are not easily answered questions, but I think they're important ones.
Thank you. Just breathe into this space, take a moment, and just stay present as best we can. And if there's someone who's not had a chance to share, who would like to, we open this space. And it's okay to also be okay with open space, to just be together. There is strength and nourishment in being together. Just breathing in presence, the love of community. Any words or promptings or thoughts that are coming, or images or metaphors?
For me, it's kind of a moment of clarity, although it's also confusing. And I try to balance those two things. Often in moments of tragedy, at least the way I perceive this moment, you also get a sense of clarity that was maybe not as obvious before, and it helps me to put things into perspective. You have all these hypotheticals about threats and what things might mean, but now we are in this moment of reality, and it might help me also to deal with it instead of something that is very hard to grasp. And I'm not trying to diminish the pain that is probably coming out of this moment for many. But it's always good to know what you're up against. That makes sense. And then the other thing that comes to me is this kind of historical perspective. And it's very hard to disentangle myself from these 2 and 4 year thinking cycles of politics and shifts in this country. And I think it's good to step back and look the late 19th century to the early 20th century to the 50s and 60s and see what comes up out of those moments for the country and where the country has moved after very painful periods. And so in that sense, it also helps me to see maybe we are in this moment now and there is still hope on the other side in a way. And so those things I try to put my focus on. And I value what you said, Todd, also the prayer that was offered today as the prompt for our discussion on this, don't take on the tools of the imperial power. Do the justice work that you have been doing for the last years, how long or however long you feel you've been in this, and that has not changed, and the values have not changed that motivated you or me. So I think it's a good reminder to keep doing, even if you feel like the results are not coming fast enough, or maybe never in the sense you envision them, but it's hard to not get discouraged. And at the same time, I feel we have no other choice than to be hopeful.
Thank you, Knut.
It is definitely hopeful to know we are not alone. That I'm praying that these and knowing that these discussions are happening in churches and in other ways people gather, maybe fueled and buoyed by faith or not, but that people are contemplating the essentialness of goodness and doing the right thing and um, appealing to people's better nature and bringing their faith to action. This is definitely a time of how your faith can come to life. Uh, so we're not alone. That is a hope. That's a hopeful feeling. Um,
And we've talked about drawing on the wisdom of our ancestors, the Dorothy Days, Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Dr. King, Howard Thurman, and there's current writing right now from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Venezuela, that are current voices that can be companioning voices that are very, very current, that are also a part, I think, of this global support system that connects those who have gone before us as well as those who are with us. And I think one of the things that's so often common in the United States is we have a tendency, generally speaking, to be very US centric and to see ourselves as the center of the universe. And that's part of what needs to be decentered. And during this time, there's so much that we can learn from our siblings in places that have been going through oppression and violence for actually decades and years and years. And there's a lot to learn from those voices and those who write in places where just writing and trying to publish is incredibly dangerous and incredibly risky. So we have our ancestors and we also have current companions on this journey.
that's really true. I think of all these friends of mine across Africa who are in Congo and Uganda and Nigeria and Ghana and all these friendships and conversations I've had where they've looked to the United States as the place of refuge, a place where they aspire to be to get away from draconian policies or economic hardships or brutal repressive governments. Uh, um, we are more their friends, and to learn from their experiences, to learn from the world. You're absolutely right. And so there's a kind of hopefulness, but also it's a daunting sense of reality, to feel like we have more in common with the places that were looking to us, uh, sort of before. But yeah,
Other words, images, metaphors, thoughts. I'll offer it aligns with some of what we've already shared today. It's a quote by Laura Jean Truman that Elder Acusia from Unity Fellowship Church DC sent out this week. Jesus, keep us from becoming what we are called to transform. Protect us from using the empire's violence in our word, in our theology, in our activism, and in our politics for your kingdom of peace, our realm of peace or community of peace. They use the word kingdom of peace. But I oftentimes paraphrase that to realm or community of peace. This is in alignment with some of what's been shared today. How do we do the essential work of not becoming that which we seek to transform? To paraphrase Audre Lorde, she's talked about how we cannot use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. That again is a paraphrase of some of the thought from Audre Lorde.
self-care is super important. Um, so books and writings that people have, reminders to find strength in nature, um, find strength in calmness and peace in music. Um, these are all ways to be kind to yourself, to gather strength, to strengthen yourself. Prayer and meditation and gathering together. Those are all the right things to do.
Thank you, Todd. We do have a message that's come in from Detroit from Jackie Lois.
Yes, I'll be happy to read that. Jackie says, unable to join today to speak directly to the group. I have found that reading and books and spending time in reflection and silence, the grief that rises has surprised me, feeling less likely to try to convince anyone of anything, but so willing soon to be open to listening, to claim Sabbath, rest, and to join with others who create joy and light and love. Often it is not where you would expect. A great book I read this week, I think it is called We Leaders Be Looking by Eddie Glaude. Time for reflection. What have you read that helped? Are you open to seeing miracles?
sharing resources with each other is part of what we can offer. Can be comfortable with open space.
Remember, there was a building in downtown DC that had a huge, I don't know if it was graffiti or just um, huge building size message, which was 3 words: faith works wonders. And it comes to me right now. It always struck me back then because you can read it as 3 separate words, and you can read it as a sentence. Um, you can read it as a affirmation, or here it is an affirmation. So it just sticks with me now. Faith works wonders.
Yeah. And that's getting back to the question of what's essential, looking for the wonder in any given day, looking for the signs of hope. Last week, the message talked about Desmond Tutu, who said he cried every day, but also laughed every day. And when I was going through the passing of my partner, John Raymer, who died on June 6, 1996, I can remember going into that time and I asked God, I just remember asking God directly, how are we going to get through this? And I can remember a very clear response that every day there was going to be grace, and that every day there was going to be humor. And that was true every day. I made a point moving through that time to just notice how grace showed up and to notice how humor showed up. John had an amazing sense of humor. And even when his body was shutting down, he continued to express that humor in ways that I loved him enough and knew him well enough. I could detect the humor in very subtle ways. And the grace was very, very clear. And in fact, we had a member of the church whose name was Grace. And she embodied that. She was one of those who would come and just quietly sit by his side and offer that presence. And one of the humors was she was chewing her gum one day pretty vigorously. And John, though he had limited energy, said, "Please stop smacking your gum." And so, so that's the other thing is it'd be so easy to get so overcome with some of the realities which we must face that we miss the smiles and we miss the joy, the beauty.
I think it's essential to hold on to the energy that was felt. You know, to hold on to that energy and to use that energy to harness, you know, power to, in whatever way, to be able to affect change in whatever way that, you know, that might look, towards, you know, changing oppression, things like that. But yeah, not to lose the energy, the focus, the momentum, but to use that as power to carry on and to look for ways to continue to be empowered.
Thank you for that word, energy. Thank you. We move towards our non-close, as Dr. Carlisle likes to say. Any other just non-closing thoughts as we begin to move from this time into much of what's ahead of us as we continue through this day? Certainly open this time for any non-closing thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing your presence today. Thank you for sharing your energy.
Yeah, I would just,
Go ahead.
yeah, there's something both comforting and daunting about this idea that this is our time to live our faith in determined and present ways. And I'm talking our time in terms of, you know, cycles of history, um, other people, other places. As we began the conversation here today, you know, um, have faced in- uh, incredible brutality and repression, um, and we're here reflecting on it and drawing from it and learning from it. And so this is our time to be as present as however possible. Like you say, some people, sh- I will say this, will be and should be marching and being present and showing up. Um, and some people will be writing about it, and supporting it and being guided in their musical and artistic expressions from it. Um, so I feel like there was a call. The call of these days is to be as present in your faith as possible, and then a little bit more.
You know, one of the things I'm struck by, I know we're at the end, I think I have words for it because of a couple of experiences I've had in particular in the last couple of days, is how much brutality a lot of people have already been going through prior to this time. This is we live in a context that is so brutal to so many people. And there's so many people who've been living in such difficult circumstances up to this time. And so those folks now get to continue in that brutality that many are now concerned about, in a way that feels new in some kind of way or really different. And I think I've been so aware in the last couple of days, and this has primarily been, I mean, I think about my own history, and there are many things personally around that in a lot of ways. Because of what is true historically that is not so historical, for instance, in my own family. But right now, I'm talking about folks who are immigrants and migrants who I've been around in the last couple of days, who've been living that brutality and now don't know what's gonna happen to them in the next, like 5 weeks or 10 weeks, and whether they'll be permanently separated from their children. And so that brutality has existed for years because of the unknowns. And now those unknowns are like off the charts. And so I want to say that I don't want to glorify in any way what has been true in this country for as long as this country has existed and before it did. And now I think some folks are more aware of particular things in particular ways because of what is coming up. I also don't want to minimize what is currently now true. So I'm not minimizing anything, and I want to name that experience. That potentially what is coming is carrier identification, because somebody will be looking for you to have it in order to be sure you get to not be swept away and taken from your children. I'm feeling a lot about that from just people I've been in contact with in the last couple of days. And I want to go ahead and feel my grief.
Yeah.
I feel absolutely, I'm not them, and I feel devastated by that. And so I just want to name that. That's where things are, and I'm not hopeless. I can hold my grief and know my grief and feel absolutely like, yep, there are different kinds of doing. And I don't want to not feel that sorrow and that grief. And that feels very much part of my spiritual life, is to let myself feel that as I was with those folks yesterday. So that's real.
Yes.
And I know for me to grief around children, I talked to you yesterday. So I have a child who passed. That's my separation from my child in this realm. And these are folks who are wondering where their family members are going to be, 8 weeks from now, 10 weeks from now.
Yes.
So I want to name that and say that that's real.
Yes. Anything else to name or to speak in real words? So just receive another breath to be present to what's real. And we thank each of you for your presence. And for those of you who may be later be with us on demand, we're available to have conversation with you, even if it's a year from now or down the road. And my email is revdwayne@mccdc.com or Rev Kathy with a C at mccdc.com. So now, knowing that you do have that presence, you do have that grace, you have a community that cares for you, and we have a God who cares for each of us and supplies in body, mind, and spirit. Amen. And so it is. Amen.